Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I have someone that I think you're going to really enjoy. And here's why I would say that, because there's nothing to bring two people together like futzing with unworking technology for 30 or 40 minutes before they actually get a chance to have a conversation. And that's exactly what happened to my guests and me today. And you know, I think it's in times like that that you kind of find out what people are made of. So I think you're going to really love my guest today. Her name is Shawna Schuh. She's does leadership coaching. She's a speaker. She's a columnist and author. And we both believe that communication matters a lot. And I think you're going to enjoy what Shawna has to say. So Shawna, welcome to the show.
John, it's so great to be here and that we figured it out. Woohoo for us.
Yeah, there you go. We did it. And we didn't get cranky or anything. There was
no foul language spoken.
We kept it fun. It was pretty good. So now, Shawna, you come from a world originally that I don't know. I can't even, like, finishing, fashion, and something else. Commercial. So you tell us about that. What is that world that you started in?
Well, your readers might relate to this. I was raised on a farm, and I'm a redhead. I had white pasty skin, braces because my teeth were terrible, glasses like those Coke bottle thick, right? So my mom was like, "We really need to send her somewhere." So they sent me to finishing school. And back then you learned things like how to set a table, how to do a resume, when to wear white gloves, stuff that's important.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I did that. And then what was interesting is I got older. And so I was 18. And once again, my folks were very, very low to middle class. And there wasn't enough money for education. And so Mom said, "I've been giving you dancing lessons. You should compete for, a scholarship pageant." And so you're looking, John, you're talking to a former Miss Hillsborough Happy Days. Okay.
Wow. Congratulations. Miss Hillsborough Happy Days.
Mm-hmm. Got to ride on the fire truck, big time stuff. Anyway,
woo! That's very fun.
The first place winner gets a full scholarship to finishing school.
Really? Wow.
So I went back and went to finishing school a second time. And so now this girl's gone through finishing school 2 times. And here's what I want to insert a little something for people in that. Just like when you read a book a second time and you go, "Oh my God, that book has changed."
Yeah. Right. Wow. They rewrote this. Yeah.
But you've changed. So when I was really young at 12, what I learned in finishing school and then what I learned at 18, it's like why we should revisit some, what I would consider incredibly good techniques or good tools or good books, or why we continue to educate ourselves, because when we change, the things that we're reading are changed for us. So anyway, I went on to do a lot of other things, and I was unemployed. I was an unemployed entertainer. And there was a new finishing school. And this is where you learn these things, and fashion and commercial work. And they said, I applied. And it's kind of a weird story. I had no resume. I walked in without, I was just seat of my pants. And I ended up with this amazing woman. And she said, "So tell me what you can do." And I said, "Well, I've been through finishing school twice." And she says, "Well, we have a need for this program." And I go, "I'll write it." So, God, just cockiness makes me sick now. And I said, "I'll write it." So I wrote the program, and she said, "We'd like to hire you to teach this one class, but you have to go through our school to learn how we do things."
3 times.
So the 3rd time through finishing school, I ended up having actually some talent to teach, to help people get from where they were to where they should be. And I went on to work for that school for decades. I ended up I wrote all the programs. I became the school director. It was a gigantic launching ground for my speaking. And then like you had asked, how do you become a coach? But because I would look at things from new ways when I started doing professional speaking, which I, by the way, didn't even know there was such a thing. I was like, when somebody says, well, there's a speaking industry. And I was like, no, is it like the Filbert industry? Like nobody knows about this?
Yeah.
Because in my world, if you're not good at what you had to be an expert to talk about it. You don't just suddenly say, I'm a speaker. You had to, you actually had to have some chops. And so anyway, people said, could you help us? We like the way you think. Could I work with you? And then I went and got my neuro-linguistic programming certificates, and I started studying business certificates, and to become an executive or leadership coach. Long story, but weird things in there. Hopefully that people can use.
Let's go revisit a couple things of that. Because first of all, the second time you went to finishing school.
Yes.
What was one of the big ahas that you had missed the first time?
This is such a good question. What are you good at what you do?
Well, I'm just listening. It's all interesting.
Well, and I would say the biggest one was when you're young, or when I was as young as I was, I didn't actually understand how much control I had.
Oh, that's good.
And how much responsibility. It was no one else's responsibility to get through the class or do what you needed to do. It was mine.
Yeah. And, wow. That's great.
Yeah. And so
now remember what you're going to say, but I want to put a pin in that one because I've met a number of adults who don't get that yet. Like that is not just a taken for granted kind of thing. And I'm not kidding. And I'm not disparaging anybody. I think that's pretty advanced level, that's advanced level stuff to get that it's your responsibility and not like it's not your fault. But you're the one. No one else is going to do that for you. Right.
Well, and I actually live on a little ranchette. I have a horse boarding facility as one of my businesses.
Oh, and nice.
Nobody's going to claim that stall.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's like my horse.
Not even the horse. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my responsibility. And I think that's one of the reasons that I like leaders to have pets. I think every human should share life with other species. And one of the reasons is because your communication skills get better. They don't talk back to us. They certainly communicate. And when we're responsible for another living thing, whether we're 6 or 60 or 106, when you're responsible for another living thing, you develop leadership skills.
Yeah. Well, geez, that might be where I got anything I have because, I had 2 dogs and I never thought of it that way, but I think that it's an absolutely valid point. And I just want to say it's basically a year almost to the day that I had to let Flash go. And most of the people listening would know Flash was my service dog for about 13 years. He was with me for 15 years and watched me for an autoimmune disease for 13, traveled all over the world, didn't go to Yemen and didn't go to Finland. One of the times I went because I was going so far north and it was so cold. I didn't want to risk his paws. And you're absolutely right. Like having that responsibility, it fundamentally made me a better person. And I still just want to be the guy that Flash thought I was,
Yes. I think it's, you tell a good story. It hurts my heart. Is there an animal in your life now?
Well, there's my wife.
I bet she loves that. Okay,
yeah, I think she'd take that as a compliment.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's how I meant it. There's all kinds of animals in my life now. It's kind of interesting because my wife took us vegan 2 years ago, and now like every animal on the planet is our animal. It feels like we're giving to all these charities for animal welfare. And I try not to go to the 2 extremes. I think horses and humans can have a good relationship, right? Just treat your horse well. But it's really hard for me to think about getting another dog. I was really stuck on that guy and I'd have to, I over the 13 years that he watched me, my autoimmune disease resolved quite a bit through a lot of inner work that I did and through Flash helping me not go over the edge and have such horrible results. You know, he'd catch me early and I'd start to notice the edge sooner. And I did a lot of forgiveness and loving myself. And I think I've, you know, I'll be okay without a service dog. And I can't imagine another dog right now yet. You know, I'm just not there yet.
Oh, and all good, you know, because there's the grieving process, which you're going through is people will poo-poo someone who's grieving an animal as if it's not as vital as it is a person. And I always laugh and say that, you know, we raise children so that they can be, other people can value them. You know, you raise them to leave you, but you raise your animals to stay with you. And there's no other species that we get to have as an infant, really an infant, and go all the way to old age. And who we are in caring for this species is, it betters us. So I really suggest, and people will go, I don't want the pain, right? It was painful.
Yeah.
When you lose an animal,
for sure.
There's nothing quite like it. And yet there's nothing like being loved like that. Well,
people said, you know, when I was grieving, people would say, oh, John, I get it. It's like losing a family member. And I would look at them like they were a little bit crazy. And I'd say, well, yeah, like losing a family member that never made you wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So good. Well said, John. Well said.
You know, and I do have a 5-year-old. So, you know, sooner or later, he'll probably want a dog. And he did get time with Flash. And so anyway, but okay, so that is a huge thing that you got your second time through finishing school. I'd say that's one of the ultimate life lessons is you're responsible for like your results in your life.
Agreed.
And like no one else was going to do it. So now can I tease with you for a minute and then we're going to get into the work you do. So, okay, I'm going out on a limb here and I think, I think that I think you'll get the fun side of this, but you do not strike me as a 3-time finishing school graduate.
I'm with you. I don't strike me that way either. Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, what's so intriguing is as I grew inside that organization and became the writer of the programs or what have you, what I really realized is that etiquette has a place in our world.
Yes.
Because if you know the rules, then it's better for you. On the other hand, if you're focused on the rules, you're missing the relationship.
Ooh,
so
I'm
so really willing to throw out a rule if it's about the relationship. And that's how I always taught it. And I believe that etiquette is sort of missing more and more in the business world, in familial. We're so caught to our phones that, matter of fact, I saw a meme the other day that was so funny. It was heaven. And there were 2 angels standing in the back and there were all these people up in heaven and they all were empty-handed, you know, looking down. And they said, what's wrong with people? Well, they're all in despair because they're looking down without any input right there. And they're all, I was like, oh my gosh. It was a very funny piece because so I believe in the etiquette, but I believe that you break whatever rule. Now, I like people to know the rules because then they break them consciously instead of unconsciously, that you're just being rude and you don't get it.
Right.
However, I'm much more about the relationship and I'm messy in life.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad I had the courage to ask that question and I'm glad you laughed. And I think that answer is absolutely key. I think etiquette's something, I mean, I kind of think etiquette and integrity and, you know, like civic responsibility and stuff like, did we stop teaching those things at some point, you know? And,
forgive me, John, but you know what I used to say all the time? I taught youth and that makes you a tough and also good presenter. You had to be, you know, on top of it. You have to go quick. You have to make it engaging and back then we didn't have all of the distractions we have now. But I always used to say to my people, they would go, well, we need to send our daughter to, finishing school. She needs manners. And I'm like, if you really want your daughter to have manners, I need the parent in there. It's the parents.
Yeah, you got to go to finishing school.
Oh, yeah, because they're just reflections of you. And so that's a hard thing to realize. And I know this about myself, that no matter what's going on in my life, I was at the scene of every crime. I was like, I'm there for everything that happened. And your children are just a reflection of you. So if you're proud of your children making good choices or what they do, then you've done a good job.
Yeah. Well, gosh, so two things. Like, I want to go down that path. And before I do, I just want to say, I want to reiterate etiquette and knowing the rules. And it's great to know that stuff. Yes. And that's not the point. The point is the relationship. The point is what etiquette can bring to being connected to people and feeling comfortable with each other and treating each other well. And if there's a rule that's going to interfere with the relationship, we'll take the relationship.
Agreed. And if you know some of these, and etiquette is an interesting word nowadays. It's much more about courtesy. I would call it courtesy in today's world instead of etiquette, because etiquette screams in my mind rules, right? Which side is the fork on? Yeah. Where courtesy is much more, are you using someone's name? Or are you saying, hey, dude, what are these niceties, kindnesses, courtesies, opening the door for someone, letting them go first? All of these things you would put underneath this umbrella I'm calling courtesies, and not necessarily etiquette rules. And really, if we were more courteous, we would have the relationship. We would have way deeper relationships.
Yeah. Well, I love that. It's just great. Now, here's the other thing that you said that I'd really like to unpack a little more. If these parents who want their kid, she needs finishing school. Well, if you really want her to get it, you've got to get it. Now, let's just talk about leaders for a minute, right? I mean, they come to us and they say, we want our team to have, this or that or the other thing. And I think your answer to the parents applies right here, talking to leaders too, right?
Absolutely. And that one of the things that I love about most of my coaching clients, and many of them, is the leader will sign up first. They want to see what I'm about.
That's great. Yep.
And you're like working with them, and then suddenly I need you for my team. And so I'm facilitating the team, or then their top, it's a gift to get leadership, because we're now going to invest in you and keep you. But the leaders that believe that their people need coaching, but they don't, usually where the problems are lying right there. Yeah.
Yep. Sometimes I feel like I'm coaching their successors.
You probably are. Yeah, you probably are.
Well, so Shawna, what have you noticed in this world, in that realm, about, because we're recording this right, January 20th is the day we're sitting here recording this. And there's been a lot said about the Great Resignation. And I think that there's more pressure on leaders and teams and companies to keep the good people, and the good people are, peeling off. But I think that that's mostly happening in places where there isn't this kind of engagement, and organizations aren't cultivating their leaders, because people like to matter and they like to be cultivated and they want to get better. And if, as a company, I think if you're giving people coaching like this and you're making them better, they're more likely to stick around. Is that your experience too?
Well, if you make sense, let's look at anything logically. And that's the way most leaders look at it. What is the real truth? Where is the ROI on this? And if you become a good communicator, if you ask, and really what leaders do is they ask better and better questions, where the world of dictatorship or telling or selling your ideas is long gone. However, many are still there. And why they are is not because they're unintelligent or they're uninformed. It's because they didn't really get any training in leadership. I mean, who's doing this? We're not learning it in schools. We're not learning it in
Right.
college. And then
Right.
we go through, and forgive me, leadership classes, which I have one, an online class.
Sure.
I less believe in it less because it's not a route. It like you're never going to use it. The way the neurology of our brain is that we have all these neural pathways. And when you're learning something new and you actually work it, then it stays. But if you learn the concept of leadership and you never use it, you went through the class. However, that doesn't make you a good leader.
Right.
So I'm a hands-on. We only work on what is happening in your life right now.
Yeah.
Not real scalable. It's deep work
Yeah.
that I dig
Right.
more than anything else in the world. When they get it, when they use the tool, and they're like,
Yeah.
holy moly, this works. And I love it.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it.
So I mean, I'll preface this question by saying I've just been looking through a lot of the intake forms where I ask people what they want out of working with me and things like that. I'm trying to figure out better how to speak to my core audience, feel like I haven't done a great job with that. And as I read through that, one of the things that came up, I focus on the communication aspect of leadership a lot like you. I think we have slightly different angles and slightly different focus, but among things like being nervous and self-confidence and, being scared to get on stage and things like that. One of the other things that showed up often enough that I was surprised and noted it was I've never been taught this. I don't know how to, I don't know exactly how to do this. And the other part that goes along with that is that as I watch the leaders that I see, and as I think back in my experiences at companies and things, I think that a huge portion of what we see modeled by leaders is not only not what works with human beings, but it's oftentimes 180 degrees from what actually works with human beings. It's more looking good, trying to be tough, trying to be strong, this top-down kind of domination leadership. And I just don't think the world, if it ever worked, it doesn't work now.
I am in agreement with you. So what's your question in there, John? Forgive me if I lost it.
No. Here's where I was going with that. What is it that you see from your perspective that, what's one of the biggest issues that you see? Because those are the things that I see in my intake form. And as I thought back, it made sense to me. What are some other things that you see where leaders need support or where they're falling down or where they're doing something backwards?
Well, you explained it very well. And I think that when they think, I don't know what I'm doing, there's this imposter syndrome that many of us have. You were real good at what you did and you got moved up, or you showed leadership ability. So you got moved into a position. And many times it's with peers that you were on the same level with now.
Right.
And you're attempting to navigate what goes on next. And they're attempting to navigate how they treat you now that you're in a different role. Yeah. And so that place of uncertainty brings fear. It brings the lack of confidence. Mm-hmm. So they a lot of times overcompensate with either being much more hard, difficult, or it has to be this way. And I understand because now they're being judged not on their own performance, but on a group performance.
Right.
So suddenly the pressure's on, and people under pressure are not always their best. And one of the things that I use animals again to acknowledge this is they're feeling hurt or maybe not betrayed, but they weren't given any training. They're put in a position above their peers who they used to consider friends.
Yeah.
And now those friends are snarly sometimes to them.
Yep.
Or
maybe even resentful or jealous.
Right. And they're hurt now. Yeah. And so in the animal world, generally you will never get hurt by an animal unless that animal is hurt or frightened. So if you're going to get bit, it's because that you backed something into a corner. If you're going to get kicked, it's because that horse is fearful. Well, humans are exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So when a leader is put in a position
Yes.
and they're backed into a corner, they can be hurtful. They bite or they
Mm-hmm.
shut down someone and they don't realize how much
Yep.
damage they just did. So
Yeah.
I also have the opinion, though, that even though they've done this, then maybe a listener right now going, "Holy moly, I did that!" Right? I've been
Right.
out at someone, or I was harsher
Yeah.
than I would like to because you were frightened or you're hurt.
Yeah.
I'm of the belief that there's nothing you can't recover from.
That's brilliant. I
You just
agree.
have to say, I think I bit that person, or I think I was harsh, and now what tools, what techniques, what intent do I need when I deal with them going down the road?
Yeah. This brings a question that I've been wondering about lately. I always kind of wonder about it because I notice it myself and I notice it sometimes in my little 5-year-old son. He's getting pretty good at it actually, but why is it so hard to say I'm sorry?
Interestingly enough, I've got a theory. I have a theory on lots of things.
Yeah, yeah, good. I figured you would, so I asked.
It's because it's about you. It's you saying, I did it wrong, and I'm acknowledging I did it wrong. And you're also putting yourself at the mercy of the other human being. So I'm going to
Right.
give you something that you can use. I talk to my clients a lot about this. Yes, you did something in error, or your company did something in error, or you bit someone, right?
Yeah.
By being harsh, whatever. And
Uh-huh.
when you go, I'm sorry, it's sort of like this. If you've ever slammed your finger in the door and after you get it out and you just stick it under your armpit and you're like, I'm all right. But the minute somebody
Uh-huh.
goes, ooh, that's gotta hurt. Next thing you know, you're bawling, right?
Yeah.
When you bring attention to the pain, it hurts
Right.
more. So
Yeah.
when I say I'm sorry, I'm bringing attention to my mistakes. And what can the other person say to me except, well, you should be. Well, you shouldn't do it again. Or, well, that you never,
Uh-huh.
blah, blah, blah. And next thing I know, I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry. So what
Right.
I for people to do is, if you are indeed sorry, if you're not going to do this again, put the power on the other person, not to ridicule you, not to agree with you, but do this instead of saying, I'm sorry. Look right at them and say, can you forgive me? Now, suddenly it's about them. Now, if they go, no, I can't forgive you. Well, you just found out
Yeah.
something about that person.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah,
if,
there you
like
go.
your child, your 5-year-old, if you
Yeah.
promised and it didn't happen and you looked at him and says, I'm sorry, whatever, you're always sorry. But
Right.
not your, but this way, if you looked
Sure.
right at him and said, can you forgive me for this?
Yeah.
Of course it's a he. He's going to
Yeah,
forgive
yeah.
you, right? He's going to forgive you.
Yeah.
He's going to, of course I forgive you, Dad. Your
Yeah.
team. Can you forgive me?
Right. Yeah.
They get to be the better person.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
don't just keep using that and don't make the same mistake over and over again, right? That's what
Right.
they
Right.
won't forgive. But this
Yes.
is a way to get what you want, still show that you are the leader without having to grovel.
Right.
That help?
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I had heard I've really made it an art to apologize because I screw up so much.
Me
And,
too.
I feel like one of the key things is that it's got to be a real apology, right? I can't say, gosh, I'm sorry I did that. But when you do that thing, no, that's not going to work, right? I got to say, look, I own it 100%. This is my mistake. I'm sorry. And you just helped me really get the value of that final thing. Can you forgive me? Now I'm putting it in their court. I'm giving them a say. We're both acknowledging that it's now their thing. I have owned it 100%. I've said I'm sorry, but I didn't stop there. I said, can you forgive me?
Yes.
And now they get to make a choice. And that's cool.
It's very cool. I want that choice.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So
Yay.
What's something else that you bring from the world of all the animals in your life to leaders?
Oh my heavens. There's so much. I've had a couple of TEDx talks, and on one of them, I'm explaining the fact that I had this pig, right? And the potbelly pigs are still 200 pounds in the world of pigdom.
Those are the little pigs.
That's tiny. When
Yeah.
when a pig can weigh several thousand, I'm seriously, 1,000-pound pig, a 200-pound pig is little. So I had this 200-pound pig, and I had the door open apparently because he was in the living room. And I'm immediately horrified. I run in there and I start to push him out of the living room. But I'm just going to tell every listener, if they don't know this, you can't push a pig. Okay?
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere. He just put down his little hoofs and he was squealing. Oh my!
Yeah.
It was nightmarish. And so what we have to learn in the animal kingdom is people don't like to be pushed. Pigs don't like to be pushed, and it's ineffective for all of it. So what do you have to do instead? Is as a leader, instead of pushing your ideas, pushing your agenda, pushing people to be their best, you got to stop and say, you can't push a pig. Just really an impossibility. Then what does the pig want? Now I have to use my intellect and I have to use my own abilities to say, well, in this case, pigs mostly like food. So, if you go get a jar, some sort of a bowl of food, and shake it, that pig's just trotting out of the living room.
Right.
What do your people want? And the only way you'll know that is not by making it up, but by asking.
Yeah.
And very few leaders, more and more are, but they don't ask, or they don't ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So if they ask well, they're going to have incredibly good teammates that want to stay.
Yeah. I love it. You can't push a pig.
Nah.
I had to do with Flash. He was a rescue and he'd been very abused before I got him. And, when dogs get scared, they can do that thing kind of like a skunk, right? And if I even talked to him cross, he would do that. So, because he was just scared, And so I learned, it took maybe one or two times. And I realized I had to, all the training that I did with him had to be positive reinforcement only, or I would just get a horrific mess, and it worked really well. And I remember the day that it dawned on me that if I could do this for my dog, why couldn't I do this for the people in my life?
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And I really like the point that you make of good leadership is largely about asking good questions. And this kind of a question, right? Like, what is it your people like? What's going to be a motivator for them? If we're going to use the analogy, what's the bowl of food you can shake to get them out of the living room, right? So I think that's awesome. They ask
good questions. You've said something else that's really good too, in that positive reinforcement. A lot of times with my leaders, they get caught into a loop. They've told people and they're not doing what they've asked, or the performance isn't really where it is. And they're not getting the results that they want. And so they're either going to harp on that, or they're going to have a stern conversation about how things have to change. When in reality, if they could praise more of what they wanted, they would get more of what they wanted. And if they're praising effort, Carol DeWitt wrote a wonderful book on mindset about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And so we have a tendency not to praise. We're praising the wrong things as a leader. So I'm going to give two sides of this. Number one, it's easy to say, I praise. Well, let's say that somebody in your team comes up and shares with you unhappiness of another team member or somebody doing something wrong. And you say to them after they've basically gossiped, sorry, it's gossip. You say, thank you so much for your courage in telling me this. Well, they just felt great. You are going to get more problems, more gossip, more people bitching at you than you could possibly ever imagine, because you're praising something you don't want. Now, leaders will say to me, but Shawna, I want to know that stuff. Really? What are you going to do? Right? If they're adults and you hired well, they got to figure it out, because that's called adulting. So but when you praise, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for sharing all of your grievances. What the heck? So careful with praising things you do not want. Right.
I mean, and gossip is the most corrosive element in human relationships. So particularly
and they get thanked. People get thanked. Thank you so much for telling me that. No, No. So then the question is begged, what should you say? So, here they are. They're spilling their
Yeah.
beans about something that I should know about or whatnot. I guess one question, it depends on the circumstance, always. Uh, if somebody comes up to me and says, I wanted you to know that so-and-so has been doing this.
Right.
And one of my questions is, help me understand why you're telling me this. Oh my heavens. Suddenly they're
Yeah.
backing up. Well, because I thought you would know, but why you would want to know?
Yeah.
So you thought I would want to know because another
Yeah.
question. Well, because then you could fix it. So have you talked to them about it?
Yeah.
What?
Right.
What? I should have
Yeah.
responsibility? I can fix something inside the team myself? Yeah, you
Right.
can. So these
Yes.
kinds of questions said in a loving tone, kindly, with lots of courtesy, helps people
Right.
understand that they've got way more power. Because I think many times leaders believe that their job is to listen to what everybody has to say. That's not always what your job is. And in fact, your job, in my mind, is to help people discover and uncover things for themselves.
That's good. I like
You're
that.
not. Your job is not to fix it. You hired well. Let them fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so that's great. And it brings us kind of back to that beginning lesson from the second time through finishing school, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's the lesson that you learned at 18 going through finishing school a second time, that you were in charge and like you could, no one else was going to do it and it was up to you.
Yes.
And to get everybody on your team organized around that, and I think that there's an element, because I do a lot of work with large corporations, like many people, lots of employees. And one of the things they always want is for people to bring a more entrepreneurial mindset.
Yes. Ownership.
And I feel like that's what you're saying, right? Like really at the end of the day, everybody is the entrepreneur of their life.
Yes.
If they're, if they really get how it works, right? Like they're in charge of their life. They're the one who's bottom line responsible. And it's not just this or that. It's everything.
No, you're absolutely right. And people are taught based on praise. Remember, praise what you want more of. It's
Right.
the same thing with animals. It's the same thing with people. Praise what you want more of. And if you're not if you're praising what you don't want, praising gossip or praising something that continues, or you're taking their excuse that they will do
Right.
better.
Right.
So let me see if I've got this right. You're going to do better. What does that look like for you? I just told you I was going to do better. That's all I had to do in the past. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, I really want to know your plan. So the more that you are giving them this, the more, number one, your job becomes true leadership instead of management.
Right.
And number two, people they've got the talent.
Yeah.
Human beings can do this if we allow it. Too many times we have to keep our hand on, and we're living in a world of so much litigation and so much offense. And so help me understand what's offensive. Tell me how you want this to be handled. Well, I need to be respected. So tell me how you're respecting everyone.
Yeah.
You just keep asking these questions because guess what? They're probably not respecting other people either.
Right. Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. It's really interesting. And I feel like such an old man kind of whatever, but like it really does come down to personal responsibility. It's just all it ever can come down to, and I think there's a fundamentally fulfilling life, more fulfilling when you're willing to take that on. I do a leadership group and we do a book a month, and I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I'm sure you've probably heard of that.
I've read it multiple times.
Yeah. And I resisted it for a while. Cause it was I was scared of it, but I love how he basically says, what if the biggest question of all, what if we've been asking it backwards this whole time, right? Like, what if the question is not what is the meaning of life? What if the question is what is the meaning of your life? What do you say is the meaning of your life? You know, and that's just a question that's worth answering.
And also that the second half of that is if it meaning and happiness, you know, it was Lincoln who said a man or a person is about as happy as they make their mind up to be.
Yeah.
And we're in a society that is inundating us with the next thing that will make us happy.
Right.
And
all external.
Yes. The minute you actually go, I'm making good decisions. I'm learning. I'm growing. This makes me happy. I woke up this morning just happy as a clam. And I live in an ideal situation. And people say, oh my God, how lucky you are. Well, yes, I am. And I created it.
Yeah.
So when you get rid of your personal responsibility, you know, at one time I'm a believer in a higher power. And I remember that I feel that when I die, that I may meet this higher power, him, she, whoever that is. And I wouldn't want this entity to say to me, Shawna, why didn't you use all the talents and gifts I gave you?
Right.
And I have to go, well, gee, you know, Lord, if that's what we call them, my parents, you know, they just didn't give me the opportunity and I didn't have money and blah, 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 blah. Or, well, why didn't you do what I gave you to do? I married the wrong person, you know? No.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I stayed stuck or I let fear. No, I want to say I did all I could with what I had every day. And that's all you can do. I'm going to do all I can with what I have every day. Now, I am a person who went through finishing school 3 times. However, those classes taught me about classes that taught me about if I was going to be a teacher, if I'm going to be a coach, then I better educate myself. I better be the height. And this is kind of an interesting story. I did television commercials. And I remember I was teaching television commercials and you're auditioning for the same things. And if you're in a school, ultimately you're teaching all of your students to audition against you.
Right.
Okay. You and I might be going for the same coaching clients. So are you going to share absolutely everything you know, or are you going to hold a few things back?
Right.
And there's choice there. And many people do. They're going to hold back or they're going to wait and not give you something. And I was not that girl. And I said, you know what? I am going to give it all. I'm going to get everything I learn, everything I'm just going to give it all to you. I'm just going to teach everything I know. And here's what started to happen. I became untouchable because every time I taught the best way to do something, it reinforced the best way to do something for me. Most of those people never took my advice anyway. So I became unstoppable and did 7 films and all these television commercials. And it was amazing to me that when I gave it all up, when I said, I am going to teach everything I know, that everything got better for me.
Yeah. Well, you know, I looking at the time and I want to be respectful of the time that we have for this. And I want to roll that over again to leadership, because in what you just said, I hear excellent leadership as well, right? As a leader, are you going to hold on to those petty competitive little mini things that you have with your team or with your colleagues or, you know, the person whose job you're aspiring to and stuff? Are you going to actually let that make you be a little creepy? Or are you just going to just give everybody around you the absolute best that you possibly have and let it go as it may, right?
Number one, that's a great question to ask yourself. Am I the best leader I can be? And if not, what would make me there? So am I doing everything I need? But here's the next piece of a great leader in my mind that stacks on. It's what you believe about your team. And if you think that most of them are dumb or that they don't work hard enough or that they're taking advantage or whatever it is, they will know it. People always go, no, they don't know I don't like them. Like a dog can feel fear, a horse can feel, really? You don't think they know? That's where you're delusional. So I think it's what we believe about ourselves. Like a mantra not an affirmation, but a mantra that I truly believe is that I'm smart enough to figure this out.
Yeah.
And if that means I have to call someone else or I have to get IT involved or whatever it is, I'm smart enough to figure it out.
Do it. Yeah.
So I believe that about myself. I believe that I am evolving because my job is to help leaders evolve. That's what I dig about it. However, I have to believe that everyone on my team, and they must believe that everyone on their team is the correct person.
Right.
And help them get to be the best they can be. Now we're cooking with grease.
Yeah.
That's an old expression.
Yeah. There you go.
When we really actually kept grease to cook with.
Yes. Right. Well, and I totally agree. I think that in a way, your job as a leader is to speak to the greatness inside every person on your team.
Well said.
Even before they may know it's there, right? Even if they are getting bad results, there's still a great person in there that could get great results, right? And if you don't think there's a great person in there that could get great results, then you probably should let them go, but maybe even more, you should look inside you and I wonder why I would need to make people small, right? There's something over here about me. So great. Really great. Well, I love what you're out there in the world bringing to leaders and leadership, Shawna. And I love hearing all the fun stories of your finishing school past and your commercials and your movies. And I think, the other thing that I think is interesting is, and this will maybe be our last kind of beat. You've got a background in performance.
Yes.
Right. The camera turns on and you got to do it. Right. And you can't stop in the middle and try again. And you get a few takes when you're shooting a commercial, I guess, but there's something about that performance piece of just having to, the show must go on, that I think is also a really great leadership skill. Have you thought about that for yourself or noticed that
Yes, I think you're right. And it's, what is it? I think John Wooden said this, it's all about practice.
Yeah.
And my coaching clients will say, oh, I wish I could ask these questions. And if I help them think a different way, then I'm in it all. This is all improv. You and I didn't know what the questions were. We had no idea which way it would go. So what I believe about myself and what you apparently believe about yourself is we're smart enough to figure it out. And whatever comes my way, if I have the proper intent to be kind, to solve a problem, to look in there and figure out what's happening in front of me, then it's juicy, good stuff.
Yeah.
Instead
really
of
is.
I have to be perfect or I have to deliver it right. Like now when I'm presenting, I know what I want to come across to the audience. And then I allow everything that's inside my brain to come forth because the audience will kind of feed it to me and I'll see that they're missing it. So I'll make a different point. But if I was too rehearsed, then I'm about me and not about the other person. So I have to be focused on my audience. And when the best performers are, they're focused on their audience, not themselves.
So I'm going to so we'll close this out with one of my favorite quotes, if that's okay.
Please.
From a fellow performer, none other than Snoop Doggy Dogg, who said, "Don't be nervous, be at their service."
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Isn't that fabulous?
Don't be nervous, be of their service. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So thank you for being at our service, Shawna, and thanks for joining me today. And thanks for working through the technical difficulties with such.
Thank you.
Now I know why you're so good at working through tough stuff like that 3 times through finishing school and then teaching it for, it's that part. I would now believe you went to finishing school. So thanks so much. And we're going to put the links to your TED Talks in the show notes, TEDx Talks. We're going to put your URL in the show notes and your LinkedIn. But if you want to find Shawna, she's at SHAWNASCHUH.com. Shawna Schuh, SHAWNASCHUH.com. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier, but it is in the show notes. And, thanks for reminding us you can't push a pig, and for all of the other wisdom bombs today, Shawna. Thanks for joining me. It was such a blast to have you. Anything you want to say before we go?
Just thank you. You're doing great work out there, and it's a blessing and a gift to be on the show.
Thank you. All right. And thank you for joining us. We'll hear you next week on speaklikealeader.show. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.